I came home just after 12 p.m., my suitcase still in my hand, and the first thing I noticed was the porch light already on, even though no one was supposed to be there. I slid my key into the lock like I had done every day for 3 years, but this time it wouldn't turn. I tried again, harder, my hand starting to shake, until I heard something that made my stomach drop: laughter, coming from inside my house. And then the door opened just 2 inches, and my husband looked at me like I was a stranger and said, "You don't live here anymore." If this story truly resonates with you, only if it speaks to something real in your heart, take a second to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, and what time it is there right now, because I want to know who's here with me in this moment. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and that night, standing on my own doorstep, locked out of my own home, was the moment everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my family collapsed. 3 days earlier, I had kissed Daniel goodbye in this exact doorway, his hand warm on my back, telling me to have a safe trip, telling me he'd miss me, telling me not to worry about anything at home. I remember the smell of his cologne, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes when I said I'd be back Sunday night, the way his smile felt just a little too tight, like he was holding something back. I should have noticed it then. I should have noticed how his phone kept lighting up on the kitchen counter that morning, how he flipped it over every time I walked past, how his voice dropped to a whisper when he took calls in the hallway. But I didn't. Because when you've built a life with someone, when your name is on the mortgage, when every inch of that house holds a memory you created together, you don't expect to come home and be treated like you don't belong there anymore. Standing on that porch, I could see past his shoulder into the living room. My living room, where my furniture was exactly where I left it, my throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch, the framed photos still lined up on the wall, except now there were people inside like they owned it. His mother, Linda, stepped into view behind him, arms crossed, her expression calm, in a way that felt rehearsed. And then Sophie, his sister, appeared too, holding a stack of papers like she had been waiting for this exact moment. I remember the cold air hitting my face, the weight of my suitcase pulling my arm down, and the way everything inside my chest went completely still, like my body knew before my mind could catch up that something was very, very wrong. Daniel didn't open the door any wider. He didn't even look guilty. He just stood there, blocking the entrance, like I was the one intruding. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was planned. But what I didn't realize yet, what I couldn't possibly see standing there in the fading evening light, was just how far they had already gone, and how badly they had miscalculated who they were trying to push out. For a second, I honestly thought this was some kind of misunderstanding, like maybe they were joking, like maybe Daniel was about to step aside and laugh and say I had overreacted, but he did not move, and Linda's voice cut in sharp and controlled, "Emily, you need to listen carefully. This house is no longer yours." And Sophie stepped forward, extending those papers toward me like she was handing over proof of something already decided, her eyes avoiding mine, her fingers gripping the edges just a little too tightly. I did not take them right away. I just stared at Daniel, waiting for him to say something that made sense, something that sounded like the man I married, but instead he sighed like I was the inconvenience, like I was the one making this difficult, and said, "You signed the transfer, Emily. It is done." My ears rang. Signed what? When? My mind started flipping through memories too fast to catch anything clearly. Every document I had ever touched, every time he had asked me to initial something, every moment I had trusted him without reading twice. Slowly, I reached out and took the papers from Sophie, my fingers cold against the smooth surface, and I saw my name at the bottom, my signature, clean and familiar, placed exactly where it should be, and for one terrifying second, my entire body went numb because it looked real. "This is not possible," I said, but my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Linda gave a small, almost sympathetic smile that did not reach her eyes. "You have been under a lot of stress lately," she said softly, like she was explaining me to myself. "It is not surprising you do not remember." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet click, because I knew that tone. I had heard it before in small ways, in little comments, in subtle suggestions that I was forgetful, overwhelmed, too emotional, and now it was all coming together in a way that made my skin crawl. Daniel crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe, completely relaxed, like this was already over. "We are not trying to make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You can come back for your things later. We will arrange a time." Your things, not our things, not the house we bought together. My house was 10 feet away, and I was standing outside like a stranger asking permission to enter. I glanced past them again, scanning the living room, and that is when I noticed something else, small but wrong. A new lock on the inside panel of the door, one I had never seen before, freshly installed, gleaming under the light, and suddenly it hit me. This had not happened today. This had been planned while I was gone, step by step, timed perfectly so I would come back with no warning, no preparation, no chance to stop it. My heart started pounding, but my face stayed still. I looked back down at the paper in my hands, at the signature that was supposed to erase me from my own life, and instead of panic, a single thought pushed through the noise. I do not sign anything without reading the original. Not ever. I learned that the hard way years ago, long before Daniel, long before this house, and it was a rule I never broke, which meant if this signature was real, then the document they showed me was not the one I would have signed. I lifted my head slowly, meeting Daniel's eyes, and for the first time since the door opened, I saw something flicker there, just for a second, uncertainty, like he was waiting for me to break, to cry, to argue, to prove that I had nothing left. So I did the opposite. I nodded once, calm, quiet, almost detached. "Okay," I said, handing the papers back to Sophie without another word. Linda blinked, clearly not expecting that. Daniel straightened slightly, watching me more closely now. I picked up my suitcase, turned around, and walked down the steps without looking back, every step feeling unreal, like I was leaving behind something that was still mine but temporarily out of reach. Because in that moment, standing in the fading light, with nowhere to go, I realized something they had not accounted for. They thought they had locked me out. They thought they had already won. But if that document was not the original, then they had just made a mistake big enough to destroy everything they were trying to take from me. I did not cry until I was 2 blocks away, and even then it was not the kind of crying that breaks you down. It was quiet, controlled, almost angry, like my body refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart on that porch. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel, replaying every second in my head, the way Daniel said it was done, the way Linda spoke like she had already decided who I was, the way Sophie could not even look me in the eye. It would have been so easy to believe them, to convince myself I had missed something, that I had signed something without realizing it, because that is exactly what they wanted. Confusion, doubt, hesitation. But the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. I do not sign anything without reading the original document, not a copy, not a summary, not something handed to me casually across a table. I learned that lesson years ago when a business partner tried to slip in a clause that would have cost me everything, and ever since then, I had been careful, almost obsessive about it, which meant if my signature was on that paper, then I had seen the original. And if I had seen the original, then there had to be a record of it somewhere I trusted. My chest tightened as I realized exactly where that would be. I turned the key in the ignition, my hands steadier now, and pulled out onto the street, my mind already shifting from shock to something else, something sharper. I drove straight across town to the one place Daniel had never had full access to, the small storage unit I rented 2 years ago after we bought the house, something he had laughed about at the time, calling it unnecessary, saying we had plenty of space. I had smiled and let him think that, because the truth was I did not trust having everything in one place, not completely, not even with him. The facility lights buzzed overhead as I punched in my code at the gate, the metal sliding open slowly, the sound echoing in the quiet evening. Unit 214. I had not been here in months, but I knew exactly what was inside. I unlocked the door, pulled it open, and the familiar smell of paper and dust greeted me like something solid and dependable. Boxes labeled in my handwriting, neatly stacked, organized in a way that only made sense to me. I dropped to my knees and started going through them, not frantically, but with purpose, flipping through folders until I found the one I needed, property records. My fingers paused on the tab for just a second before I opened it. Inside were copies, But more importantly, behind them, sealed in a protective sleeve, was the original deed. I slid it out carefully, my heart beat loud in my ears as I scanned the page, every line, every signature, every date. And there it was. My name, Daniel's name. Both clearly listed as owners. No transfer, no amendment, no additional filing. Nothing that matched what they had just shown me. I exhaled slowly, a breath I did not realize I had been holding since I stood on that porch, because this was real. This was the truth. Which meant the paper Sophie handed me was not just wrong, it was fabricated. My hands curled slightly around the edges of the document as the full weight of that realization settled in. They had not just tried to push me out, they had created something fake to make it look legal, and that changed everything. I sat back on the cold concrete floor of that storage unit, the hum of the overhead lights steady above me, and for the first time since the door closed in my face, I felt something shift completely. Not fear. Not confusion, control. Because if they had gone this far, if they were willing to fake documents and lock me out while I was gone, then they believed I would not fight back, or worse, that I could not. I looked down at the deed in my hands one more time, tracing my own signature, grounding myself in something that could not be taken away by a locked door or a lie. Then I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found a name I had not needed in a long time, but always kept saved just in case. And as my thumb hovered over the call button, one thought ran through my mind, clear and certain. They thought they had already won. They had no idea they had just given me everything I needed to take it all back. I pressed call before I could second-guess myself, and it rang only once before a calm, familiar voice answered, "This is Michael Reeves." I swallowed, steadying my voice as I said, "Michael, it is Emily Carter. I think I need your help." There was a brief pause, just long enough for recognition to settle in, and then his tone shifted slightly, sharper, more focused. "Emily, it has been a while. Tell me what happened." I did not dramatize it. I did not ramble. I told him exactly what I had seen, the locked door, the changed locks, the papers with my signature, and the fact that I was holding the original deed in my hands that said none of it was real. He did not interrupt once. When I finished, there was another pause. But this one felt different. Like pieces were already falling into place on his end. "Do not go back there tonight," he said firmly. "Do not confront them again. If what you are saying is accurate, they have already crossed into something very serious." My grip tightened around the phone. "Serious how? Forgery? Unlawful exclusion? Possible fraud," he replied, each word landing heavier than the last. "But I need to see everything to be sure. Can you meet me first thing in the morning?" I looked down at the document in my hand, at my name printed in a way that was supposed to erase me, and nodded even though he could not see it. "Yes," I said, "I will be there." I hung up and sat in the quiet of the storage unit for a few seconds longer, letting the weight of what he said settle in, because this was no longer just about my marriage falling apart. This was something else entirely. They had not just tried to push me out. They had tried to replace reality with something they thought I would accept. I carefully slid the original deed back into its sleeve, then into my bag, making sure it was secure before I stood up. The air outside felt colder when I stepped back into the night, but my mind was clearer than it had been all evening. I was not going to argue with them. I was not going to beg to be let back into a place that was legally mine. I was going to let them sit in that house, comfortable, confident, thinking they had already taken everything, because the more secure they felt, the less careful they would be. The next morning, I sat across from Michael in his office, the same office where he had once helped me navigate a complicated business dispute years ago, the same calm, structured space that now felt like the only solid ground left. He reviewed every document I had brought, the original deed, the copies, the timeline I had written out from memory, his expression unreadable but focused. "They are relying on the assumption that you will not challenge this," he said finally, setting the papers down. "Most people would panic. Most people would not know where to start. And if that document they showed you looks convincing enough, they might even get away with it for a short time." I leaned forward slightly. "But they will not." He met my eyes, and there was something steady and certain there that made my chest loosen just a little. "No," he said, "they will not." He reached for a file on his desk, already preparing, already moving ahead of them. "We are going to do this properly," he continued. "We will file for immediate relief, establish your ownership, and document the unlawful lockout. If everything checks out the way it appears, they will not just be asked to leave, they will be ordered to. Ordered. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and final. I pictured Daniel standing in that doorway, so sure of himself, so certain I had no way back in. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to anticipation, not revenge, not anger. Just the quiet certainty that the truth was on my side, and the law had a way of catching up to people who thought they could rewrite it. I stood up, gathering my things, and as I walked out of that office into the late morning light, I realized something that made everything feel different. They thought locking me out would end the story. They had no idea it was the moment it actually began. I did exactly what Michael told me to do, nothing more and nothing less. And that was the hardest part, because every instinct in me wanted to drive back to that house, to knock on that door, to demand answers, to force them to look at me and explain how they thought they could erase me from my own life. But I did not. Instead, I waited. I let the process move the way it was supposed to, quiet, controlled, documented. Over the next 48 hours, everything shifted behind the scenes in ways Daniel and his family could not see. Filings were submitted. Ownership records were verified. The original deed I had protected for years became the center of something much bigger than they had anticipated. And I stayed completely silent. No calls, no messages, no attempt to go back. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them to believe their version of reality was holding. On the third day, Michael called me just after 9. 0 inches the morning. His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it that told me everything I needed to know. "It is ready," he said. "We have a court order. Immediate enforcement." I closed my eyes for a second, feeling that same quiet shift again, the one that had started in the storage unit, but now it was stronger, grounded, real. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he replied. "They are formally notified that they have no legal right to occupy that property, and if they refuse to leave, it escalates very quickly." I pictured the living room again, the way they had stood there so certain, so composed, as if they were the ones in control, and for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine the moment that certainty would break. That afternoon, I parked across the street, not in the driveway, not in front of the house, but just far enough away that I could see everything without being seen immediately. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady this time, not shaking, not uncertain. At exactly 2:17 p.m., a marked vehicle pulled up in front of the house, followed by another car I recognized from Michael's office. 2 officers stepped out, along with a man in a suit carrying a folder. My pulse picked up, but my expression stayed still. This was it. I watched as they walked up to the front door, the same door that had been closed on me just days ago, and knocked firmly. It took a moment, but then the door opened, and I could see Daniel's outline in the frame, his posture casual at first, until he noticed who was standing there. Even from across the street, I could see the shift, the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the way his head tilted like he was trying to process something that did not make sense yet. The man in the suit spoke first, holding out the documents, and I could not hear the words, but I did not need to. I knew exactly what was being said. Linda appeared behind him next, her expression tightening as she looked from the officers to the papers, and then Sophie stepped into view, her confidence from 3 nights ago completely gone, replaced with something uncertain, something uneasy. Daniel took the papers, scanned them quickly, then again more slowly, and I saw it happen, that moment where understanding catches up to assumption. His entire stance changed. The ease was gone. The certainty was gone. He said something. Too fast, too sharp, and one of the officers responded with a calm firmness that did not leave room for argument. Linda started speaking, her hands moving as if she could explain their way out of it, but the man in the suit simply pointed to the document again, steady, unshaken. And then, after everything they had done, after locking me out, after presenting those fake papers like they had already won, I saw the one thing they never expected to feel. They stepped back, not by choice, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. I stayed in my car watching as the door that had been closed to me was now being opened under entirely different circumstances, and for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. They did not just make a mistake. They built their entire plan on the belief that I would not fight back, and now they were about to find out exactly how wrong they were. The house feels different now, quieter, not because anything inside has changed, but because I have. A week has passed since that afternoon, and I still catch myself pausing at the front door sometimes, just for a second, remembering what it felt like to stand there and not belong. But now, when I slide my key into the lock, it turns smoothly, effortlessly, like it always should have, and that small sound, that simple click, reminds me of something I almost forgot. This place was never taken from me. It was just tested. The living room looks the same, but the air is lighter, clearer, like something heavy has finally been removed. Daniel is gone. His family is gone. Not just from the house, but from my life in a way that feels permanent this time. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. There were no long conversations after, no apologies that meant anything, no explanations that could undo what they chose to do. And strangely, I do not need them anymore. Because what broke that night was not just my marriage. It was the illusion that love means trust without boundaries. I used to believe that if you loved someone, you did not question them, you did not double-check, you did not hold back pieces of yourself just in case. But I have learned that real strength is not in blind trust. It is in knowing your worth so clearly that no one can rewrite it for you. Protecting yourself is not selfish. Being aware is not paranoia. Keeping control of your own life, your finances, your decisions, that is not distance, that is wisdom. And if there is one thing I would tell anyone listening who feels like something is off in their life, something they cannot quite explain, but cannot ignore, it is this: listen to that voice. That quiet instinct you keep pushing down because you want things to be okay. That voice is not there to hurt you. It is there to protect you. I ignored small signs for months because I wanted to believe in the version of my life that felt safe. But safety is not what someone tells you. It is what you can stand on when everything else falls apart. And sometimes, losing the people you thought you needed is exactly what shows you how strong you actually are. I am not angry anymore. I am not even bitter. What I feel now is something I did not expect. Clarity. A calm kind of certainty that I can build something better, not just around me, but within me. I take my time now. I read every document. I ask every question. I trust, but I also verify. And I no longer apologize for that. Because the truth is, no one else is responsible for protecting your life but you. If you are going through something similar, if you feel like someone is slowly taking control away from you, piece by piece, I need you to hear this. You are not powerless. You are not crazy. And you are not alone. There is a way back to yourself, even if it does not feel like it yet. Sometimes it starts with one document, one decision, one moment where you choose not to break, even when everything around you is trying to make you. And maybe that is how the universe works. Or maybe it is something bigger, something we cannot fully explain. But I believe now that what is meant for you will not be taken by deception, only revealed through it. So thank you truly for staying with me through this story, for listening, for being here. Because sharing this is not easy, but knowing someone out there understands makes it feel a little less heavy. If this story spoke to you in any way, feel free to share where you are listening from, what time it is in your world right now, and stay connected if you want to hear more stories like this. My name is Emily Carter. I am 32 years old, and the lesson I want to leave you with is this: never let anyone convince you that you do not belong in a life you built yourself.